And today we are going to discuss a little bit about the psychology of the Hanukkah candles. It's a great story. In fact, actually, this is based on a shir by Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, who many of you I know appreciate a lot of his teachings, watch many of his videos, listen to lots of his shiurim. He was my teacher many years ago in yeshiva. So I've learned this from him, and I saw this month in the Jewish Life magazine, which we sent you all last week with your Hanukkah candles, that Paula Levine adapted some of these ideas in her article about her personal experiences and struggles. So I think it's something it's worthwhile. We'll look at it from a different angle a little bit and see how some of the ideas that Rabbi Jacobson taught, based on the teachings of Hasidus, but he adapts it really nicely. So I will share with you some of those ideas, and hopefully you'll if they resonate with you. That's the point of our shir, right? So, of course, we are all familiar with the way that we light the Hanukkah candles, right? On the first night, we lit one, and on the second night, we light two candles. Last night, we lit four. Am I allowed to say that tonight we're going to light five? Is this like the Sphira counting? No, that's only with the Omer. We're not allowed to say. The way it works with the counting the Omer, you have to say, last night for supper we had. So tonight we will light five, and that's already something very powerful, where the light will outshine the darkness because you'll have more candles lit than less. And basically at this rate, we will end up by Sunday evening, please God, with the full spectrum. All the candles on the menorah lit will be happily gathered around the 8 candles on the final night of Hanukkah. And please God, the plan is for Mayor Umfo. I'm not sure exactly how you're supposed to pronounce her surname, but she's going to be coming to our giant menorah lighting at Santon City, and you're all invited to that. So come join us there on Sunday evening. The thing is about the lighting of the menorah, what a lot of people are not aware of. Oh, sorry, just a second, guys. I have somebody waiting for me outside. Hold on a second. They could do what they need to. Okay. Thank you, guys. Sorry about that. So the thing is that a lot of people aren't aware of. Yes, it's true that we light our menorahs this way, the way we light them. But in the Gemara, there's actually a discussion about this. There is a debate about how you're actually supposed to light. And as most debates, it's a debate between, not most, as many Talmudic debates, it's a debate between Hillel and Shammai. And they argued about the correct method of lighting the candles. It's not mine, maybe yours. So, of course, the academies of Shammai and Hillel very famously had, sparring partners, debated many matters of Jewish law, and this is one of them. But we have to understand, what is it about? Because they weren't just debating how he should light. This is just a debate from right to left, more candles or less candles. What's the idea behind this? What are they really debating? Okay? Give it a second again. I'm needed here in the office. Sorry, it's a busy day. I want to give the shir, and I want to give you full attention, but they just need me here for a second, so I'll be right back.
It's a busy day today. They're doing a telephone fundraiser, so there's lots happening.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm back. So, the debate between Hillel and Shammai, right? They were discussing, they lived under, themselves, they lived under Roman rule in the period, the era of the temple's destruction. And they actually lived after the story of the Hanukkah, the whole Hanukkah miracle story took place, about a century later. So, Hillel was born 55 years after the Hanukkah story victory, and Shammai was born 60 years later. So, not that long apart, 50, 60 years later. And they both had tremendous flourishing academies of students. And the students they produced, they had different viewpoints, perspectives on how to observe, how to practice, how to apply the Torah's teachings. Now, usually the school of Shammai, they take a more stringent view, as in general, if you know how Shammai would rule. And Hillel was known to be more lenient in their rulings. There's around 300 arguments that are recorded between the two schools in the Talmud. Between Shammai and Hillel themselves, there's quite a few arguments, and there's a difference between Beis Shammai. If it says Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, then it's not the individual sages Shammai and Hillel. If it just says their names, then it means that Shammai and Hillel themselves are arguing. Okay? So some of the arguments were the two sages themselves, but many of the arguments were their students decades later. So a lot of the disputes are between them or between their academies, their students. Now let's look at what the Gemara tells us about the story about lighting the menorah to understand the difference between their perspectives, their opinions. If you open a Gemara Masechet Shabbos, it says the Gemara as follows. Tana Rabbanan, our sages taught, mitzvahs Chanukah ner ishu beisa. The way to fulfill the mitzvah of Chanukah is, at least on the basic level, is for each person in their household, every house, to have one candle to light on every night of Hanukkah, which we discussed in previous days, maybe in Monday's shir, the basics of it. Now the Gemara goes a step further and discusses Hamahadrin ner l'chalecha be'echad. Those who want to be Mahadrin, there's different standards of kashrut. Mahadrin is like the upper standard. Those who want to beautify the mitzvah, what do? They're going to kindle a light for each member of the household. Every member of the household is going to kindle a light. But now let's go a step further. The Gemara says, V'hamahadrin mina mahadrin. But those who want to be most beautiful, you want to be the creme de la creme, the very best way to fulfill the mitzvah, then you have to argue. That's a debate. Beis Shammai, the Academy of Shammai says, the first day you're going to light 8 candles. And in the second day you're going to light 7 candles. And in the third day you're going to decrease it, etc. Beis Hillel, on the other hand, tells us the opposite. Beis Hillel says, so again, Shammai calls it Parches v'Heilich. What you're going to do is light less candles each night. So first night 8, then 7, then 6, then 5, then 4, 3, 2, 1. Whereas Hillel says, Moisef v'Heilich, that we're going to light more candles, progressively increasing each day. So although the mitzvah of lighting the candles on Hanukkah, as the Gemara puts it, is fulfilled by one member of the household, the head of the household, lighting just one candle each night for 8 nights to remember the great miracle that God performed for our ancestors in the Hanukkah story. But nevertheless, that's the basics, the basic way of fulfilling it. But the sages, they gave us 2 levels of enhancing the mitzvah. The first level is that each member of the household lights 1 candle each night. And the second, the most optimum level of fulfilling the mitzvah, is that each member should light a different number of candles every night. How many candles? Uno candelico. You know that song? How many candles? So this was a debate of Shammai and Hillel that we discussed. Both of them said, we're going to light a different number of candles each night. The question is the order. Do we count down or do we count up? Beis Shammai, the Academy of Shammai says to light 8 candles the first night, 7 the second night, and decreasing each night. But Beis Hillel, the Academy of Hillel taught, no, we're going to increase, we're going to add light each night. Why the disagreement? Why does this have to be a controversy? Why everything in Judaism has to be a debate between one sage and another? So let's continue in the Gemara. Amar Ula said, Pligi batre amarai b'marava. These two great scholars in the West, you know, the West is the West Bank. West is a reference to Israel. Two scholars in Israel argued about this. And they arguing now about the argument of Shammai and Hillel. One was Rabbi Yossi bar Avin, the other was Rabbi Yossi bar Zvida. So again, two Rabbi Yossis. They're both arguing about the reasoning, the rationale behind Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel's debate. Chad Amar, one maintains, one holds. The reason of Beis Shammai is that it should correspond to Yemei. It should be correspond to the days that are still to come. Yamim Hanichnasim. And the reason of Beis Hillel is corresponding to Yamim Hayotzin, the days that have already passed. So Shammai says on the first night of Hanukkah, there's still 8 nights. There's 8 nights to go. So you light 8 candles. Second night, there's only 7 nights to go. Until the last night, 1 candle. Last night. Hillel says the opposite. First night, 1 candle. Second, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Chadamar, the other Rabbi Yossi says that's not the argument. Tamid Beis Shila Keneged Parei Chag. Beis Shammai's reason is that it should correspond to the Parei Chag, to the bulls that were offered on Sukkot in the Beis Hamikdash. If you recall, a few weeks ago when we were celebrating Sukkot, we discussed this, that we offered 70 bulls in the temple in the Beis Hamikdash during the festival of Sukkot. Why? For all the nations of the world. So Shammai says Hanukkah will correspond in the same way. How did it work on Sukkot? On Sukkot, we would offer 13 bulls the first day of Sukkot, 12 the second, until the last day was 7. And you can do the maths and figure out a total of 70. The other Rabbi Yossi says no. The reason of Beis Hillel is Marlin B'Kodesh Ve'Emaridin. It's a basic concept of Judaism that we always have to increase in matters of sanctity. Just like we want our bank accounts to constantly grow, well, likewise, when it comes to spiritual matters, we like to grow. So yes, the first day of the festival, we brought 1 candle, one light, and the second day, we're going to add more light until there's all 8 candles lit. But if we think about it, both of these explanations, I'm not exactly sure. What are they arguing about? According to the first way of understanding the disagreement of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, what's the difference? Is this a significant argument? Are they arguing just because they feel one way of counting is better than the other? Count the days coming, the days going? What's the difference? What's the significance about this? There has to be something deeper in this way. And even according to the second way of understanding, Beis Hillel is saying, Ma'alim B'Kodesh, we have to increase. We have to ascend in matters of holiness. We'll never decrease. And not only is this a very logical principle, but it's actually a law, a general law in halacha. And we see this in various instances where the halacha gives us this idea to constantly increase. So why would Shammai argue with that principle? So Shammai is saying, well, if on Sukkot we were able to offer 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, based on the days of the festival, how many bulls we offered, then we should do the same for Hanukkah. The obvious question is, what do the bulls on Sukkot have to do with the miracle of Hanukkah? Or you could ask the other way. If we have to always increase in holiness, why, when it comes to Sukkot, don't we have to increase in holiness? Why 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7? What's behind this simple, I guess you could say, yet complex debate between the two great sages, Shammai and Hillel? You all with me? Good, thumbs up. So let's try to get to the heart of this disagreement, the dispute between Shammai and Hillel. Throughout the Talmud and there's lots of literature about these great giants. Shammai always depicted as the stern, the rigid, the stringent, the more disciplinary scholar, whereas Hillel's more of the kind, the magnanimous, gentle, easygoing sage. And these differences, we could see it in so many different cases of their rulings. Generally speaking, there's so many, not just rulings, but stories in the Talmud. There's quite a few. You know the famous story about the Gentile person who wants to convert to Judaism and comes to Shammai, and Shammai chases him away. You want to learn the whole Torah on one foot? Get out of here. Don't go to a doctor and ask him to teach you everything you learned in medical school on one foot. It's impossible. Hillel, on the other hand, gives them a metaphor, which is what's despicable to you, don't do it to anyone else, right? Madalach sani, lechavrach lesavid. So he says, that's the whole Torah. Go learn. So you see the differences between their personalities. That Shammai was less patient. He was more disciplinary in his ways. And Hillel was more compassionate, kinder, gentler, more understanding. Just a second. You want my computer?
No, I don't. Yeah, I'll move over.
Okay, no problem. I can move over to here. I can just bring it over. So, sorry guys, we just have this campaign coming off the ground, and I'm being a little less professional now because just the reality of what's happening here, and anyone who wants to come out with the campaign is welcome to come join us in the office. So this personality difference between Shammai and Hillel really impacted their halachic decision-making in many ways, and you can see it in the way they both rule, that Shammai is generally stringent and Hillel more lenient, and you find this in other instances as well. But there are a few exceptions, actually. Here, say hello to everybody. Hi. Hi. I got a visitor in the office today. How do you like that? Let me read to you another Mishnah. It says here, Elu devarim mikulei beis Shammai. The following are instances from the leniences where Shammai is more lenient than Hillel. And I'll give you a few examples that the Gemara mentions. One is beya shenolda b'Yom Tov. If a egg that was laid on Yom Tov, Shammai says you could eat it. Hillel says you cannot eat it. Okay, you see here, Hillel's being the one who's more strict. Shammai's being more lenient. Another example is Beis Shammai says a person is liable for a violation of the Pesach eating prohibitions with an olive-sized portion of yeast and a date-sized portion of chametz. Whereas Hillel says with an olive-sized portion, meaning giving a stricter ruling, because he's going with a smaller size. Now, that's an example where the opposite is true, but generally speaking, Shammai is the stricter one, Hillel is the more lenient one. Now, in generally speaking, am I using the word generally a lot today? It seems so. Sorry, I'm a little all over the place. In Jewish legal tradition, halacha follows the opinion of Hillel, who's more lenient. And the Talmud tells us the reason for that is because of his more compassionate nature. That's why, when it comes to halachic matters, that it made more sense to go with the one who's a little bit more lenient in the rulings. I'm going to read to you another piece of Gemara. The Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Shmuel, Shalosh Shanim Nachlaku Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. For 3 years, the house of Hillel and the academy of Shammai, they argued. Either one, both said the halacha should be like us, the way we see it. And then the Gemara says, Yatza Bas Kov Amra, a heavenly voice announced, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. Just a second, guys. That these are both the words of the living God. Come here, Simba. Come to God. Daddy. That the heavenly voice said that both are the words of the living God, but the halacha follows Hillel. And then the Gemara says, a question was raised. Since the heavenly voice says that both of these are the words of God, right? That both Shammai and Hillel, so why is it that the halacha follows Hillel? They're both correct. Why don't the students of one follow one teacher and the students of the other? Pretty much the way a lot of things are done today. people follow their rabbi, their leader? The Gemara answers, it's because the students of Hillel were kind and gracious, meaning the teacher influences the students. So it's not only the teacher who had a more gentle, compassionate personality, but the Gemara is telling us that Hillel's students tended to be more kind and gracious. And these ideas trickle down from student to student, and therefore, because of that, it was something that the Gemara says we follow Hillel. And the Gemara tells us not only that, but that the students of Hillel always quoted Shammai's opinion first. And the Gemara goes on and says various aspects about Hillel that exemplify, that demonstrate their kindness, that they were more of the compassionate, gentle, and sensitive, caring personalities. So that's a basic difference we see here between Shammai and Hillel. But there's more to this, because obviously you see their personalities and the halachic rulings, but how does that explain the Hanukkah debate, right? What's stricter about lighting 8 candles the way Shammai sees it, and how does lighting 1 candle the first night and another the second night, how does that demonstrate leniency of Hillel? We wonder what's the connection between their arguments, between their personalities that we could see in this dispute. Sorry, are you guys able to hear? Come, say hello to everybody. Hi. Hello. So let's try to understand this, and we have to get a little glimpse to understand. When you take a good look at the disputes between them, there's another common thread besides for their compassion, their kindness. And let's just examine the Hanukkah candles, okay? Where Shammai openly states that they consider the potential, the days that are yet to be celebrated, versus Hillel, who considers the practical, the days that are already celebrated. You see another difference. One is their personalities of compassionate versus stern, but another is potential versus reality. And we'll discuss this in a little bit more detail now. This theme of potential versus reality is actually, according to the Hasidic understanding, is an important part between their debates as well. It's called in Talmudic language koach and poel. Beis Shammai always chooses the idea that of the potential, and Hillel always looks at the present. Okay? So we're looking at potential versus reality. Let me just put this here from the Rebbe's teachings. He says here, we find many arguments between Shammai and Hillel where the fundamental dispute is, Shammai says we focus on the potential, and Hillel says we focus on the practical. So with this idea in mind, let's try to understand, let's try to unlock many disputes, how this applies. So one example is a remarkable debate about the merit of creation itself. Here the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, our sages taught, Shtei shanim amechza nechel kubei Shammai v'Hillel. About a long-standing argument between Hillel and Shammai, and here's the discussion. Hillel says, Noach l'ladam shle'nivra yoser mishenivra. Hillel is of the opinion that it's better for man not to have been created than to have been created. Halalu. It doesn't say Hillel, it says halalu. I made a mistake here. It says halalu aymin. Halalu is probably Shammai. Halalu aymin. Shammai says better for man not to have been created than to be created. Whereas Hillel says, it's better that we were created. So what's the debate? Right? What are they debating here? Now the argument between Shammai and Hillel as to whether it would have been better for man to be created or not is a result of two fundamental approaches to our purpose for existence. Why are we here? For what purpose? For what reason? What do we exist for? So the disagreement is whether or not the soul itself benefits from its descent to this earth, because the soul exists before we come into this world, and the soul will continue to exist even after we leave this world. Okay, so here's the debate between their opinions about potential versus practical. This is the debate in the Gemara. But Chassidus explains that the purpose of a soul's descent into this world is to achieve perfection through our mission in this world. God puts us here. We're indispensable to the Almighty's plan. The fact that we're born means we matter. We have a reason why God created us. So while the soul is on a high, yeah, it's basking in spirituality, in God's presence. So that's wonderful. But what purpose is it serving? And now it might be sensational to bask in the spiritual heavenly realm. But Kabbalah tells us that there's far more in the godly experience beyond the spiritual delight that the soul experiences before it comes into this world and after we pass on from this world. And it's from that specific purpose. That's why, yes, the Mishnah says the next world is far greater than this world. True. But it's only in this world where you get to fulfill that divine mission, where you get to do your mitzvahs, do that which you need to achieve and accomplish in this world. So with that in mind, there is not just the potential of the soul in the heavenly realm. Soul comes in this world to fulfill its mission, to do a mitzvah, a process which we unleash tremendous energy. That in the heavenly realm is just a potential, it's just a dream. But when you come into this world, you're able to achieve. Now, from Beis Shammai's perspective, the potential of that dream already exists within the soul on high. And while the soul is on high prior to its descent into this world, the soul already owns the experience that will be. So the process of descending into this world to actually realize that dream is not necessary according to Shammai's perspective. What are you going to come into this world and face all the obstacles and challenges of existing in this world? You know what kind of pitfalls we face here? As far as the soul's concerned, the soul would prefer to remain on high. And that's why he says, better for man not to be created. What do you need to face the obstacles and challenges of this physical world? Hillel, on the other hand, focuses on the reality, the practical. So he's saying a soul coming into this world, leaving the potential on high, coming into this world is a crucial, beneficial step for the soul itself, according to Hillel. And it gives us a tremendous, it gives the purpose of the soul's existence. What is the soul for? So again, it's a debate. Should the soul remain in heaven, or should the soul come here on earth? So perhaps another way of understanding this debate is something the Gemara discusses in Masechet Uktzin. Okay, the Gemara says there, Chalais Devash, that the Gemara asks a question, beginning when do honeycombs become susceptible to be mekabel tuma, to being rendered impure as liquids? Okay, so this is, I'm not going to go and explain everything now, but basically, when are they susceptible to impurity? Shammai says once one stirs it up by smoking the bees out or heating it. And Hillel says only once you break it apart to remove the honey. Again, you see the divergent perspectives of Shammai and Hillel. Shammai focuses on the potential, right? He's saying, therefore, the moment you demonstrate your intention to turn the honeycomb into liquid, even though you haven't done so yet, it already is considered mekabel tuma, susceptible to the impurity. Hillel, on the other hand, he says no, only once you've actually turned it into a liquefied honey, only then does it become susceptible. So again, you're seeing the difference between potential versus the reality, the practical. And you see the core difference between Shammai and Hillel's personalities. We saw one difference was Hillel being more compassionate, gentle, sensitive. Hillel seeing the reality, versus Shammai looked at the potential and being a lot more stern, stringent, stricter. So now what's the connection between these perspectives of potential versus practical? How did the personality differences drive the different perspectives in their halachic debates? So to understand the link between these two components, I want to dig a little bit deeper into their personalities themselves, where they come from. And this is something that's mentioned in Tanya. And we just restarted studying Tanya, so it's worthwhile to touch on this, although it's much later on. So let me just read you a little bit. It says here in the Tanya, among divine servants, there are 2 degrees and levels, which depending on the root of their souls above, are distinct in relation to the categories of the right and the left. So that is the characteristic of the left, is the trait of tzimtzum, which is contraction. We discussed a little bit about that previously. And that's concealment in divine service. From this attribute derives also the aspect of tzimtzum, limitation in divine service. For example, with charity as an example, the Alter Rebbe gives in Tanya. He says, to judge according to the means. He who expends should not expend more than 1/5 is the general halachic idea. Don't spend more than 20% of your income on, you can't give all your money away. And likewise, in regards to the study of Torah and other commandments, he makes do with discharging his duty, the definite duty to which the Torah obliges. What does the Torah say? That you have to give a certain amount of time each day in your study of Torah. So it says Yom v'Layla. What's day and night? Well, for some people, I learn a little bit in the morning, I learn a little bit in the evening. I fulfilled my duty. By contrast, the Alter Rebbe continues, the characteristic of the right is the attribute of chesed. Chesed is kindness, is love, grace. And that applies, a person who's comprised of that personality, in general, you'll find that to be more generous. Whether they're giving more money, or studying more Torah, or doing more mitzvahs, they don't suffice with just, okay, I just gave whatever charity I have to give. I just studied that little bit. The reason I'm quoting this all is because it continues to say, the root of Beis Shammai's soul is the category of the left. That's why they were always stringent. And Hillel comes from the right, which is always more favorable, which is always more kind. That's very interesting that this example is used. The left is representative of gevura, discipline, contraction. And the right is chesed, abundance of kindness. Again, you're seeing their personalities very much related to the way they would rule. So let's bring this all back to wrap it up into the story of the Hanukkah candles. How does this connect with this debate of Hillel and Shammai about how many candles to light, potential versus practical, kind versus stringent? What's the connection here? How do we understand this? What's it got to do with anything? Why are they debating everything? So let's take a few minutes and get a little bit into it. There is something deeper, obviously, at play. It's not just a debate between the two for debate's sake, for argument's sake. What's behind the debate is our question. In Jewish life, we know that holidays are not only to commemorate an event that happened years ago. Jewish holidays are far more meaningful. It's not his story, it's our story, right? And Chassidus explains that on the day we celebrate any holiday, the same energy that existed in the world back then is present as with us here today. In other words, when the Jews left Egypt many years ago on Pesach, on the 15th of Nisan, there was a specific, particular energy in the cosmos. And guess what? It wasn't only 3,333 years ago. Every single year, on the 15th day of Nisan, that very same energy is available. And therefore, we should tap into that energy. We should capitalize on it. It's not just commemorating an event of the past, history, but it's about living in the present. It's about finding that energy with me today. So, of course, that applies to every Jewish holiday, including Hanukkah. The message is timeless, it's eternal. So, in those times, many years ago, the Jews understood that when they witnessed the fabulous miracle of the oil burning for 8 days, they realized this was a holiday-worthy miracle. And therefore they turned it into a festival that we celebrate today. Because the spiritual energy of Hanukkah back then, they realized is an eternal message for all of us today. Even after the Romans destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, the temple was destroyed and Jews were now dispersed all over the world. Even in the darkest moments of exile, when Jews found themselves at the edge of the abyss, the light of Hanukkah burns on. Even in concentration camps in Auschwitz, people found ways to take a potato and to somehow make it burn for Hanukkah, because its message that military victory is not just about military victories, those come and go, but it's the light of Judaism, of our ethics, of our spirituality that can never be snuffed out. Yes, it's true that many times we've come that close to being eliminated, to being annihilated, but that flickering candle of the neshama, of the soul of Judaism that endures, not just the 8 days of Hanukkah, but for eternity. So by us celebrating this 8-day holiday, we are demonstrating how indeed we are that miracle. You know that song from Shreki? We are a miracle in the darkest moments of our history. You think about how many incidents, how many times we were nearly annihilated, and yet we're still around. Jews at all stages throughout our history, we found a way to light the Hanukkah candles because it's an important message and lesson about who we are. And this perhaps is part of the debate between Shammai and Hillel. They were aware of the power of lighting the menorah each night, the spiritual energy to defeat the darkness, to bring more goodness and kindness into our lives and into the world. So this was their debate. Hanukkah is not just about sufganiyot, the delicious donuts, and latkes, and the presents, and the Hanukkah gelt. Those are all wonderful parts of the holiday. But the menorah is the symbol of this holiday. It's a symbol of strength. It's a symbol of light over darkness. It's a symbol of the vitality, of the life, of the perseverance of the Jewish people. So their argument was not just about a numbers game. Do we light up or down? Or about biblical precedents, this one connecting it to Sukkot and this one connecting it to Mailan by Kodesh, that we always have to grow in our spirituality. Their argument it cut right to the message, to the core message of the holiday. What is the correct strategy to fight and defeat darkness? That's the question that they are debating. And so, in the Jewish Life magazine, as I saw Paula Levine put it, based on Rabbi Jacobson, who based it on Chassidus, he uses a beautiful metaphor of two very famous schools in the field of psychology. And one perspective is generally attributed to Sigmund Freud, who was Jewish, and the other to Skinner, a different perspective in psychology, and he was not Jewish. But, believe it or not, Skinner got it right. Freud is the father of psychoanalysis, and he was a big promoter of digging deep into the psyche to get to the bottom of our problems, of all our issues that we all have, and to be able to confront them. Skinner, and a lot of therapists who followed Skinner's perspective, he said, you don't have to get to the bottom of all your problems, but if you could change a little bit of that behavior, let the inner workings of your psyche figure themselves out in the process. To quote Skinner, happiness is to be found in the do's and the don'ts. So, how does this work? Freud believed that you cannot bring in new, fresh, beautiful furniture into your home if you haven't cleaned up the house completely. If your house has specks of dirt, what do you bring new furniture into a dirty house? First, make sure the house is spotless. It is completely sparkling. It's mopped. It's shining. First, you have to remove, you have to excise and root out all the brokenness and negativity in your life. Only then can you bring in the positivity. Can you start living a healthy life? So long as the inner turmoil has not been addressed, everything else, you're going to ruin the good furniture. Then you're going to bring new furniture in a dirty house. It's going to be completely ruined. It's going to get dirty. So unless you eliminate all your darkness that's lurking beneath your positive, your personality, you're not going to achieve anything, according to Freud's perspective. Your smiling facade is just going to cover up the hidden brokenness that is inside you. And that's going to leave its mark. You can't really truly be happy if you're broken inside. You'll be confused and tormented. Even your goodness, he says, is going to be blemished and flawed because you're not really ready to embrace the positivity because you still have negativity deep inside. That was Freud's perspective. Skinner, on the other hand, says don't wait till your house is completely clean to bring in new furniture because your house may never be completely clean. You got kids, you're human, you're going to make a mess. It happens. So if you think that you yourself are ever going to be perfect, you're going to wait a very long time, and that might not ever happen. And therefore, Skinner says just focus on a little bit of internal cleanse. Do an internal cleanse. You're not going to eliminate all the filth and dysfunction in your life. Instead, begin by filling your life with some goodness, with some positivity. And then you'll see that inner darkness slowly will evaporate. Yes, sometimes you have to bring in new furniture even before the dirt is removed because you don't want to wait that long to enjoy that new furniture. And then once you see the beautiful furniture in your house, perhaps you'll even be enticed and excited to do nice furniture with schmutz around. Forget about it. You're going to do a better job at cleaning up because you don't want to have that dirt around. And the same thing with your personality. If you introduce positivity into your personality, good character traits, you can say, me to behave in that way, unbecoming of me, impossible, and perhaps one will eliminate that negativity. So that's the debate between Freud and Skinner. How does this apply to the Hanukkah story? It's exactly the debate of Shammai and Hillel, according to how Rabbi Jacobson explains it. The Greeks, let's go back into the story, how they entered the sanctuary. They contaminated the sanctuary. They contaminated the home of God. They desecrated the sacred oil. They wanted to destroy Judaism, not the temple itself, not the oil, just take off the seal. What did the Hashmonaim, the Maccabees, they fought back. They liberated the temple. They kindled the menorah. They began a whole new chapter in Jewish history. They rekindled the flame of Jewish consciousness and Jewish life. They allowed the flame of Torah to burn brightly once again. And this is the debate. Obviously, this is the celebration, the Festival of Lights. But the debate that Shammai and Hillel had was on a personal, psychological level, applying that story into our lives. The narrative of Hanukkah represents our own rededication, as Hanukkah means rededication. Our own commitment to battle our personal darkness, our Yetzer Hara, evil inclination, our personal psychological problems. Whatever negativity has infiltrated our lives, has contaminated our own inner sanctuary. Whatever it is that's trying to snuff out our life of purity, of integrity, of idealism, of spirituality, of godliness. And this is the great question. How do we overcome this darkness and spiritual onslaught in our life? What can we do? This is the debate of Shammai and Hillel. One is saying, Shammai seems to be their perspective, you have to get rid of all your demons. You have to get all that negativity, all that darkness out of your life. Only then can you start introducing new light. Shammai says, if you cleanse yourself out from your inner negativity, you have to begin removing the evil from within yourself. That's why on the first night, you begin your inner work. You need a great amount of light to combat all that darkness. You need a tremendous amount of inspiration, of brightness, of grace, of spiritual power in order to take your inner problems, your insecurities, your fear, your crudeness, to eliminate it. You need a lot of light for that. Take a person who has addictions and problems. They need an extraordinary dosage of light, of wisdom, of inspiration to begin the process of confronting that inner force that has desecrated their inner sacred sanctuary. So on the first night of Hanukkah, Shammai says, when you're just beginning to rekindle, Hanukkah means to rededicate. You want that light back in your life? You have to combat all that darkness. You need a lot of light, 8 candles. Well, now that you've begun to deal with it, okay, as the evil increases, you don't need as much light as you did on the first day. So on the second night, you only need 7. until the darkness is completely gone. That's the way, one perspective of understanding Shammai's opinion. And where do we see this pattern? He's not just making it up. He says, look at the festival of Sukkot. Remember the Parei HaChag, the bulls that were offered on Sukkot, they correspond to the 70 nations of the world. The first day we confront the enormous multiplicity, the fragmentation that exists in the nations of the world. After we've cleansed part of the negativity in the microcosm and macrocosm, because it's not just about myself, but there's lots of darkness around me, we offer bulls for all the nations of the world. Now there's less fragmentation, less negativity. Well, with our work each day, that fragmentation decreases. And now the unity over the nations becomes even more of a reality. Finally, on the last day, we only need seven bulls. You've completed the process of refining the world. That is one way of understanding, from Shammai's perspective, how to deal with the darkness. So Shammai says you clean out the darkness first. You keep adding joy and positivity. Now you're achieving your goal, your mission. That was more like Freud than Skinner's perspective. Shammai was the opinion that the festival of light is all about removing the evil from our midst. Less light is needed as the evil is ousted, and each night you need less light. Hillel, on the other hand, he had a different approach. Don't start with focusing on your darkness, because if you're just going to look at the darkness, it seems insurmountable. How am I going to overcome this? The first thing is light just one candle of positivity in your life. Just one candle. When you're trying to reclaim your sacred sanctuary, don't begin with battling the evil. The first thing is to behave well. It's a gesund. Will you ever become a marathon athlete overnight? Never. It's not possible. You're not going to start running the comrades in one day. Start with 1 kilometer. Add a little bit more. Before you know it, you can run the comrades. So, says Hillel, enter the wings of the divine. Even if there's still many unresolved issues, just start with a little good. Study some Torah. Fill your mind with God's wisdom. Engage in acts of love and kindness. Create a schedule filled with positive actions. Don't focus on the bad that you find in your psyche, because everybody's got skeletons deep inside. But kindle a single candle of light, of optimism. And guess what you'll see according to Hillel? As Skinner was the perspective, the darkness will slowly evaporate. In the beginning, your light might indeed be small. Since there's so much darkness there, everybody's got problems. But don't focus on the problems. Be solution-oriented, a little bit of light. And with each progressive day, you'll see the darkness will decrease and the light will increase. That was Hillel's perspective. Hillel says, just add a little bit of light. And that's why we follow Hillel. Yes, there's two perspectives here. Shammai takes the more stringent view that you have to get rid of all the darkness, 8 candles on one night. Hillel more lenient. According to Shammai's school of thought, you have to encounter, you have to take that darkness, you have to confront it. Hillel says, a more lenient path. Begin with a little bit of light. Don't be focused on all your darkness and all your problems. So who do we follow? Who do we follow? The Lord follows Hillel, obviously. In our journey here on earth, our main focus and priority has to be to cultivate the good within us, to become ambassadors of light, of goodness and holiness. Yes, I know I still have darkness, I still have problems, I still have addictions and issues. It's not to say that we have to ignore the inner negativity. That's still there. But we cannot make that focus on the darkness the priority, because we're going to get stuck there if I say, oh my goodness, I have all these problems. Can't say, right? A person might say, it's only one candle, one act, one good deed. I got all these other problems, these issues in my life. It's true. But as the light starts burning, the darkness will decrease. And before you know it, the entire menorah will be shining brightly, filling our home with life, with light. That is the approach of Hillel. And that's why the halacha follows the teachings of Hillel. Yes, Shammai has a point that we have issues, but at the end of the day, Hillel says, A little bit of light will dispel a lot of darkness. And just light that candle. Do a mitzvah. And gradually, the darkness will disappear. So that's the mission that each of us has to focus on. Keep adding light into our life. And guess what we'll see? How the darkness will ultimately all disappear. That's our little message and lesson for today. Any questions?
Rabbi, when two questions. You said the one potential Torah and reality is what's the Hebrew word?
Koach is the reality. Poel is the potential.
Poel.
Poel. Yeah.
No,
Poel.
Poel is the reality.
Sorry. Koach is the potential.
Yes.
Poel is the reality. How it is.
Poel is the reality.
Yeah.
And then I want to know, when Moshiach comes, are we going to follow Hillel or Shammai?
As when Mashiach comes, most of the laws will then be like Shammai. But I think then we'll already see, we'll have a different perspective on reality. There won't be evil, right? There will be no evil, so we could just fill the world with light. Maybe we'll light 8 candles every night. I don't know. I'm sure there'll be a different reason to commemorate it. But at this stage in life, we follow Hillel's perspective.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Did you get a chance to look at that reference I sent you yesterday, which was about
now? Give me
about eating sufganiyot on Chanukah? But it was a scholarly sefer, all about the traditions and the restrictions. I found it fascinating.
Let me just find it. Let me quickly pick it up on my phone.
It's a YouTube.
Okay.
Which you have to watch for about 5 minutes.
Oh, should I put it on there for everybody?
Yeah, please, Rabbi.
You can. That's better.
For you, okay. Let me find it on my phone, and I will try to share it. Give me a minute, guys. Hold on a second. I'm just going to have to share my phone with you. Let's just see how we can do that. Yeah. And it's a video clip, so we want to be able to hear it. Where did it go? There we are.
Hello, fellow students of Jewish history, and happy Hanukkah. I have something really special to discuss with you today. I'd like to do a very quick book review of this remarkable book that just came my way recently. It is by Rabbi Reuven Melech ben Binyamin Yitzchak Schwartz, Reuven Schwartz, and it's called Emek HaSufganim, Iyunim Ubeurim Be'inyan Minhag Achilat Sufganim B'Yemei Chanukah. Now, if you know anything about Hebrew, you will be amazed at that title, but let me translate it into English. It is the valley or the depth of the donut. Studies and clarifications of the custom of eating donuts on Hanukkah. Wow. Now, you will recall, if you're following this series, that a few weeks ago I happened to giving a class on the Acharonim, and I happened to mention this book, which I had seen online but I had never actually picked up. And I was fascinated that someone could write, as you see here, a whole book. It is 431 pages long, mainly double column pages like this, all on the custom of eating donuts on Hanukkah. And I was like amazed. And this is the double amazing thing. The one of the members of our regular class is actually the mother of Rabbi Reuven Schwartz. And she said, "Oh my gosh, that's my son's book." And she got me a copy, and I was so excited. And so I began reading it just before Hanukkah. And, then my wife sent me out to buy donuts, and I ended up spending like a ridiculous amount of money on donuts. But now I knew what I was doing. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about what's in this book, and specifically let's connect it to Jewish history. So this is actually part 3 of a series of books on the commandment and the minhag, or custom, of eating on Hanukkah. The other 2 volumes are also quite fascinating, but we're going to focus on the depth of the donut. Now, let me just also clarify for those of you who your mind may still be boggling about what is going on here with donuts. In Jewish law, there are basically 3 levels of obligatory activities. There are Torah laws, which are called deoraisa, which means that they are either explicitly stated in the Torah itself or in closely related rabbinic works like the Mishnah. And then there are rabbinic laws, which are laws which are made by the rabbis, sometimes hundreds of years later, in order to protect the Torah laws for the most part. Like, for example, if it is forbidden to write on the Sabbath, the rabbis may add a law saying it's forbidden to handle writing implements on the Sabbath, because if you're handling a pen or something, you may come to actually write, which would be a transgression of the Torah law. So these are like concentric circles. And then the outside circle is something which is called minhag, or custom. And these are things which, no rabbi actually said, hey, we have to actually do this from now on, but there are things that seem to be kind of like natural outgrowths of Jewish practice and may be related to women's practice in particular when it comes to foods and things like that, but they become really closely enshrined to Jewish practice. And so you have these 3 concentric circles, and one should not disdain that outer level of minhag, which is in many ways an expression of the folk desires, the popular desires of the people. At any rate, the eating of donuts on the holiday of Hanukkah clearly falls within that outermost range of minhag, of custom, and it is associated specifically with oil, right? The whole practice of the commemoration of the holiday of Hanukkah has to do with lighting oil, right? We use candles as well, but the best way to do that particular commandment is to light with oil, specifically olive oil. And since donuts are made with oil, then they become a very appropriate food to eat on Hanukkah, just like latkes are, but we'll get to latkes in just a minute. One other quick note for those of you who are following the Hebrew title, the title says Emek HaSufganim, and as one of my daughters pointed out, hey, that's in the masculine. It should be sufganiyot, right? That's the term we use in modern Hebrew. Sufganiyot means like little sufganim. But in fact, if you look in the rabbinic literature, there are references to donuts in the rabbinic literature, particularly in Masechta Chala, and there it is in the masculine. So the sufganiyot is kind of like an irregular feminine that has been added in modern times. The rabbis of the Talmud and the Mishnah would certainly refer to their donuts in the masculine. The word comes from the root safag, which means sponge, like in sea sponge. And in fact, the word sufganiyot and the word sponge in English all come from that same root. And obviously it's connected to the sea sponge because, it's shaped sort of like a jelly donut, and it has kind of like a fluffy quality like a jelly donut, so that's why the donuts were named after the sponge. Now, historically, I was remarkably amazed to see that the first reference to eating donuts on Hanukkah actually dates all the way to the 12th century. I thought it was a much more modern thing, but it's a 12th century reference, and it comes from none other than Rabbi Maimon, the father of Maimonides, right? Maimonides means son of Maimon. His name was actually Moshe ben Maimon, so his father's name was Maimon. So that would mean it was referred to in Rabbi Maimon's writings, which are quoted elsewhere, in southern Spain or possibly North Africa where he lived. And that would be in the 12th century. And then in the following century, in the Provence region, which is south of France, and there was a very unusual mixed community of Ashkenazim and Sephardim living there, Rabbi Kalonymus ben Kalonymus, a very well-known poet, actually wrote a beautiful poem about the importance of eating donuts on Hanukkah. So clearly by the 12th and 13th century, this was a widespread practice. Who knows how much further back it goes, but those are the earliest references to it as a common practice, both in Sephardic lands and at least through the Ashkenazic portion of Provence in Ashkenazic lands. Now, this book is not specifically a history book. It is a halachic sefer. It's a book of Jewish law. So there's a lot of discussion here of like, how does one behave with regards to this custom? Who should eat donuts? How much donuts should eat? By the way, I tend to be very strict. I tend to eat lots of donuts because I want to be sure that I eat the minimum amount. When should one eat donuts? Does it count at night or at daytime as well? The blessing over donuts, this is actually not at all obvious, because there's a lot of discussion of like whether or not, how do you relate donuts to bread, which has a different blessing than you would have on like a cracker, for example. So I'm not going to go into those details, but I will summarize 4 quick things, because these are important for you to know if you want to observe this custom properly. First of all, what are the best kinds of donuts? Not dairy. Dairy donuts actually involve quite a few questions, and so, check with your local Orthodox rabbi before you decide whether or not to buy dairy donuts. But this is the time when you should try to get parve donuts, according to the author of the book. Secondly, they should be fluffy. Yes, those really hard, kind of like Montreal-style bagel donuts, they're not donuts in fulfilling the full sense of the word, because the donuts also have a connection to particular sacrificial flour offerings brought in the temple, which were also made in a kind of a fluffy format. Third, and this is I think really important, especially relevant for American audiences, no holes. That's right. The ideal donut for Hanukkah does not have a hole in the middle. That hole in the middle, it's like an American invention. It's like almost heresy. The donuts are supposed to be like a hole, like the manna that fell from heaven, the man that looked like a donut. Actually, when you think about it, looked like a donut, right? And thirdly, if you are inclined to Kabbalistic sources, it should have a filling. It should have some kind of a surprise, which like custard or jelly or what have you, because like you have the Torah, which has the exterior obvious, Torah's Nigle, the revealed. You also have the interior, the secret, the Torah's Nistar, which is the Kabbalah. So there you go. One last thing. Another commonly eaten food on Hanukkah is, of course, latkes, which were also made with oil. But in this book, the author, Rabbi Schwartz, clearly demonstrates that eating donuts is vastly preferable and much more significant on a halachic and philosophical level, and much more likely to fill the custom than eating latkes, which are an inferior choice overall. I hope you enjoyed this review as much as I enjoyed reading this book, and I wish you a freilichen and lichtigen Hanukkah, a happy and illuminating Hanukkah. Thanks very much for watching.
This was fascinating.
Fascinating. I think it's great. Thank you so much, Lester. That's really great. I got to go now. I'm sorry
Wow.
this campaign going, but we'll be in touch. Wish you all an enjoyable Hanukkah. Hopefully we'll see you next week. All the best. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Fascinating. Thank you.